After 3 years of late nights, impossible deadlines, and bending over backward to keep the team afloat, my boss called me into his glass-walled office and said, "Your attitude is the problem." No warning. No appreciation. Just blame. I sat there stunned, staring at the man I'd once respected. But I didn't argue. I simply nodded, stood up, and scheduled my exit interview. I didn't know it then, but what I said in that room, calm, honest, and raw, was recorded and posted online. Within hours, it was everywhere. And suddenly, his attitude was the one everyone was talking about. I started working at Apex Digital Solutions 3 years ago, fresh out of college, eager and determined to prove myself. Back then, I believed in the company's mission and values. They talked a lot about integrity, collaboration, and innovation. I was excited to be part of something that felt bigger than me. My boss, Mr. Raymond, was well respected in the industry, known for being sharp and demanding. At first, I admired him. He seemed like the kind of leader who'd challenge you, push you to grow. I had no idea how quickly admiration could curdle into something else. From the very beginning, no one else did. I volunteered for projects no one wanted. I handled toxic clients without complaint and cleaned up after coworkers who didn't know the meaning of deadlines. And every quarter, I expected, maybe foolishly, that someone would notice. That maybe I'd get a thank you or even a small raise. But those acknowledgments never came. What did come was pressure. More pressure. Expectations that grew more ridiculous by the month. Then the leadership changes began. A new executive team was brought in, and with them came a wave of chaos, shifting priorities, sudden layoffs, whispered rumors in the break room. The work environment turned cold. What was once a vibrant office filled with collaboration turned into isolated silos, where people were afraid to speak up, afraid to breathe wrong. I still gave everything I had, but I noticed how some people started pulling away, no longer going above and beyond, just doing the bare minimum. It made sense. You gave so much and got so little. Mr. Raymond, once a mentor figure, changed too. His emails grew sharper. His meetings turned into interrogations. He stopped asking for ideas and started giving ultimatums. And the worst part? He began picking favorites. The same 2 or 3 employees got the good projects, the praise, the visibility. The rest of us? We were treated like background noise. Still, I kept going. Until one day, I disagreed with him. It wasn't a big thing. During a team meeting, I suggested a different approach to a campaign strategy he had laid out. I did it respectfully, calmly, pointing out some risks and proposing an alternative backed by data. The room fell quiet. Mr. Raymond gave me a look I'll never forget, part disbelief and part fury. He didn't say anything then, just nodded and moved on. After that day, everything changed. I was suddenly left out of meetings. My projects were reassigned without explanation. He stopped replying to my emails unless they were CC'd to someone else. And the work he did give me? Menial, time-wasting tasks that had nothing to do with my role. I went from leading high-profile projects to booking meeting rooms and printing handouts. It was humiliating. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I had stepped on a toe, maybe it would blow over. But it didn't. It got worse. One of my colleagues pulled me aside and told me that Mr. Raymond had called me difficult in a leadership meeting. That I wasn't a team player. That I had an attitude problem. It was surreal. I had always been the one keeping the team afloat, the one smoothing tensions, the one who never said no. But now, I was being framed as a problem. I considered going to HR. But everyone knew HR was just an extension of upper management. Filing a complaint would be career suicide, and it wouldn't change anything. So instead, I documented everything. Every suspicious reassignment, every belittling comment, every time I was excluded or ignored. I saved emails, compiled timestamps, and even had a few quiet conversations with coworkers who had witnessed the shift and were willing to speak privately. Still, it wore me down. I dreaded going to work. I stopped sleeping. I cried in my car during lunch breaks. My passion for the job, the company, the industry, it all felt like a cruel joke. All because I had spoken up once. All because I had dared to challenge the narrative. And then came the final blow. One Friday afternoon, I was called into his office. He closed the door, leaned back in his chair, and said flatly, "This just isn't working out anymore. It's your attitude. You're not aligning with the company culture. We're going to have to let you go." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. He seemed surprised by how calm I was. But inside, something had snapped. He thought that was the end of the story. That I'd pack my things, disappear, and maybe complain to a few friends over drinks. But he didn't realize what I had been preparing. He didn't know I had scheduled an exit interview for the following Monday. Or that I had zero intention of going out quietly. And that's when the real story began. When Monday morning arrived, I walked into HR with a folder in my hand, calm but determined. This wasn't going to be the typical exit interview filled with polite answers and fake smiles. I had spent the weekend preparing, writing down every incident, organizing every document, reviewing every legal option. I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about what Mr. Raymond had turned the workplace into and how many people were silently suffering under his leadership. The HR representative, Natalie, greeted me with a practiced smile and offered me coffee. I declined. There was a camera already rolling in the room, a standard practice the company had recently adopted for transparency in all official processes. I was grateful for it. She started with the usual script. "Can you describe your experience at Apex?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Only if you're ready to hear the truth." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Go ahead." And I did. I started by explaining how excited I had been when I joined the company. How I believed in its mission. How I worked tirelessly for years without complaint, even when the workload doubled and the praise disappeared. I laid out specific examples, projects I salvaged, clients I retained, innovations I implemented that were later passed off as someone else's idea. Then, I pivoted. I described the toxic environment that slowly crept in, the favoritism, the gaslighting, the sudden and strategic isolation after I voiced a dissenting opinion. I explained how Mr. Raymond shifted from a mentor to a tyrant the moment I stopped agreeing with everything he said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke calmly, clearly, and backed up every statement with documentation from my folder. Emails, calendar invites, project logs. Natalie's smile faded. She glanced at the camera, then back at me. "Do you have this documented somewhere?" I nodded and slid the folder across the table. "You'll find everything in here, including corroborating statements from team members who witnessed what happened and were afraid to speak up." She opened the folder and began flipping through it. I continued. I'm aware this meeting is being recorded. That's fine. I want this on record. Not just for myself, but for everyone who's been overlooked, dismissed, and mistreated under Mr. Raymond's management. You're losing good people. Not because we're difficult, but because we're tired of being silenced. Natalie looked overwhelmed, but she kept listening. I detailed specific examples of discriminatory behavior, how younger, less qualified male employees were promoted over more experienced female colleagues. How voices that offered constructive criticism were labeled as toxic, while sycophants were rewarded. I explained how mental health and work-life balance were mere slogans in company emails but completely ignored in practice. I could feel the shift in the room. The camera was still rolling. And I knew exactly what I was going to do next. That night, after going home, I re-recorded my entire exit interview, not word for word, but close. I edited out confidential names, blurred out sensitive documents, and uploaded it anonymously to a career-focused social media platform where professionals often share their workplace experiences. I titled it, "My Boss Said I Had an Attitude Problem." Here's what I told HR. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few hundred views. Maybe a comment or two from strangers saying, "I've been there too." But something caught fire. By the next morning, the video had over 50,000 views. By noon, it had crossed 200,000. The story was spreading like wildfire. People were commenting, sharing, tagging others. Former Apex employees began chiming in, saying, "This sounds familiar," or "I know exactly who she's talking about." Some even shared their own stories, about being forced out, about being ignored, about being shut down for speaking up. Hashtags like #ToxicLeadership and #WorkplaceJustice started trending alongside my post. Then the media picked it up. A business news site reached out, asking for an interview. A career podcast host messaged me, saying she wanted to feature the story. A well-known corporate watchdog group reposted the video, calling it a masterclass in professional accountability. But the biggest shock came from within Apex itself. 2 board members reached out to me privately on LinkedIn. One wrote, "We had no idea. Your message is resonating at the highest levels. I'm truly sorry this happened to you." The other simply asked, "Would you be willing to speak with the board?" It turned out the video had made its way into Apex's C-suite group chat. And then to the internal ethics committee. And finally, into an emergency board meeting. Mr. Raymond tried to downplay it at first, calling it an emotional outburst from a disgruntled ex-employee. But the documentation I'd left with HR, and the wave of public support, made that defense crumble. Soon, more employees from Apex, past and present, began stepping forward. With similar stories. With screenshots. With emails. With timelines. A pattern began to emerge. And Mr. Raymond's once pristine reputation began to unravel. I never thought my final conversation at that company would become a cultural moment. I never imagined strangers would reach out from across the world thanking me for saying what they'd been too afraid to say themselves. But here we were. And it wasn't over yet. The ripple effects were more intense than anyone at Apex expected. My video wasn't just viral, it had become a reckoning. Current employees, who once stayed silent out of fear, were now speaking up. One by one, stories poured in. Marketing associates who had been told to tone it down when they challenged unethical directives, sales reps berated in front of entire teams, designers burned out and discarded like printer paper when they asked for basic respect. Every account painted the same picture, a culture poisoned from the top, protected by corporate jargon and intimidation. I watched from the sidelines as the fallout unfolded. Within 3 days, the board had scheduled a second emergency meeting, this time, not just with internal HR but with external legal consultants and a crisis PR firm. Apex's social media pages were being bombarded with comments. Review sites were flooded with employee testimonials. Clients began to take notice. A few even issued public statements expressing concern over the company's internal culture and values. For a business built on reputation and trust, this was catastrophic. Then came the part one hadn't anticipated. A recruiter from a Fortune 100 company messaged me. She said their leadership team had watched the video and was deeply moved by my professionalism, courage, and integrity. "We're hiring a director of culture and employee experience," she wrote. "We think you'd be perfect." At first, I hesitated. I was still recovering emotionally from what happened. But then I realized I hadn't burned a bridge, I'd exposed one that had been rotting for years. And now, people wanted to build something better. I said yes. Meanwhile, back at Apex, a full internal audit was underway. Employees were being given anonymous surveys and confidential interviews. HR reps from headquarters were flown in to collect data and review personnel records. Mr. Raymond tried to hold the line, pretending everything was fine. But without control of the narrative, and with the board now fully aware of the depth of the problem, his days were numbered. A week after my video went viral, Apex posted a corporate statement: "We are actively reviewing internal management practices and taking steps to ensure all employees are treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. We thank those who have bravely shared their experiences." It was a generic statement, but behind closed doors, things were shifting fast. By the second week, the board requested Mr. Raymond step down pending the audit results. He refused. So they suspended him. It made headlines. Business blogs and news outlets now tracked the story daily. Apex manager faces fallout after whistleblower's viral exit interview became a trending topic. The story had moved beyond the company. It had become symbolic of something bigger: employees demanding respect, accountability, and justice. One of the things that touched me most during that time was the outpouring of messages I received. People from all over, nurses, teachers, engineers, baristas, messaged me saying they'd experienced similar treatment. That they, too, were labeled difficult for standing up for what was right. That they'd suffered in silence but felt a little stronger after watching me speak up. There were, of course, critics too. People who said I'd ruined a man's career. People who questioned my motives. But I stayed silent. I didn't need to argue. The truth had already spoken loud enough. Apex wasn't the only company feeling the pressure. Other businesses began quietly reviewing their own internal policies. A few even launched new exit interview transparency initiatives. Workplace culture influencers began using my video in webinars and training sessions. My story was being turned into a case study at a university business ethics course. The new company I joined didn't treat me like a cautionary tale, they treated me like a pioneer. They asked me to help design systems where employees could speak freely, report safely, and be supported proactively. For the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. Valued. Heard. Still, I kept an eye on Apex. Eventually, the audit was completed. Multiple executives were found complicit in toxic management practices. Several were dismissed. Mr. Raymond's resignation was made public in a 2-sentence press release with no praise or farewell statement. The company began rebuilding, and I genuinely hoped it would become a better place for the people still working there. But more than anything, I realized something powerful. I hadn't lost my voice when I left. I'd found it. And now it was echoing far beyond the walls of a single company. In the end, losing my job was the beginning of something far greater than I ever anticipated. When I walked out of that office, I thought I was walking away from everything I'd built. What I didn't realize then was that I was stepping into a version of myself that no longer accepted silence as safety or compliance as loyalty. I found strength in my voice, purpose in my pain, and community in the thousands who resonated with my experience. The fallout at Apex wasn't my revenge, it was the consequence of years of mismanagement and mistreatment finally coming to light. I didn't need to destroy anyone. The truth did that all by itself. And while I'll never celebrate someone else's downfall, I'll always advocate for accountability, because without it, change is impossible. As I settled into my new role, helping build healthier, more transparent company cultures, I came to understand the true impact of my story. It wasn't just about one bad manager or one toxic company, it was about a system that punishes honesty and rewards silence. And when enough people speak up, that system starts to crack. People often ask me if I regret going public. My answer is always the same: no. I regret staying silent for as long as I did. I regret letting fear make me small. But I don't regret telling the truth. That video wasn't a rant, it was a reckoning. It was the sound of someone reclaiming their dignity in front of a world that finally listened. If you've ever been told your attitude is the problem when all you wanted was fairness, know this: your voice is powerful. And sometimes, the moment you think you've lost everything is the exact moment you gain yourself. And that's something no boss can ever take away from you.